Okay. Yeah. Thank you, everyone. I think, like what's mentioned, today's agenda is sharing with you a bit in terms of how customer data cloud can be connected to Amazon S3 as well as Interaction Studio. I mean, that's today's topic, and I will show you not only how to ingest the data from like those systems, but at the same time as well how we designed like the data mapping as well as the data model design for those data. And I guess the format for today is more of a hands-on kind of format, which means I will show directly the platform and show you exactly how it can be done. And I only have one screen at the moment. So in case you have any question, I think just feel free to interrupt me, or maybe someone can also help coordinate it, because I'm not able to see like the chat, I guess.
I'll coordinate.
Let me share my screen.
But Alice, your voice is breaking.
Oh, okay, cool.
I don't know. It is for me or
Okay.
yeah.
Is it okay now? I mean,
Yeah, it's okay now. Yep.
is it still breaking? Maybe I need to speak a bit closer to the laptop. Okay. Yeah. So first of all, let me maximize this. Yeah. So for this session, I have actually set up a blank CDC
No, I think
customer data cloud instance, so that you can basically see what
Harris. Sorry, Harris.
testing data from Amazon S.
Harris, can you hear me? I think your voice is breaking.
Is it okay now? I mean, if I speak this close, is it better?
Yeah, it's okay now. It's better.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, for this instance, I have actually set up a blank customer data cloud instance, so that you can see like from scratch what is required to set it up, to integrate or to ingest data from Amazon S3, as well as ingest data from Interaction Studio. And if you see over here, right, it's a blank setup. So we have 0 data stream, and we will be actually connecting to Amazon S3 in this case. And I will show you how it can be done. So to connect to Amazon S3 is quite simple. There is no necessary pre-setup, but to connect to Interaction Studio or to connect to Marketing Cloud, like a pre-setup is required. Basically, you may need to go into the customer data cloud setup. If I go into the customer data cloud setup over here, I'll show you a bit on how we can set up those data connectors. So if you see on the left hand side, there's like a list of data sources that we may want to set up. And one of them is Interaction Studio. And if you notice over here as well, there is the Google Cloud Storage. So if you want to connect to Google Cloud Storage, right? So you may want to create a new connections from here, like specifying the Google connector bucket name, secret key, as well as the access key, and so on. Okay, but in this case, we are showing, we will be showing Amazon S3 as well as Interaction Studio. So Amazon S3, like I mentioned, we don't need to specify any built-in integrations, no pre-set up the integrations, so we can directly connect it later on the data stream. But in this case, because I want to show connectors to Interaction Studio as well, so I'll connect the Interaction Studio account in here. So it's very easy, right? I just need to click connect, and it will bring up like the login page of Marketing Cloud. So I just need to fill in like the Marketing Cloud details in this case, and we'll log in. Okay. Oops. Okay, I may need to verify. Just give me a sec. Maybe I'll do it later. Yeah. So basically what we need to do is just to log in. And then once I log in, I don't have access to my phone at the moment. But after you log in, there will be a button here on the left that says, do you want to connect the Salesforce Interaction Studio data to Customer Data Cloud? If yes, then you just click yes, allow. Once you click allow, the connectors will be available over here. You can see Interaction Studio listed here once it's connected. Okay, we'll skip for now. I will show you later. But for now, let's go back to the data stream and show you the Amazon S3. Okay, so if I want to connect the new data stream, I just go into this data stream page and I click new. And for this case, I want to connect Amazon S3, right? So this shows up in the list of sources that we can connect to, right? Because like I've mentioned, Amazon S3 doesn't need any pre-setup, but like for those other sources such as Google Cloud Storage, Salesforce Marketing Cloud, right? Or Commerce Cloud, Interaction Studio, you need to connect that first in the customer data cloud setup, right? Before it appears here when you create a new data stream. Okay, so in this case, I'll just connect to Amazon S3. And I need to put in like the bucket name. So I've actually created like the bucket name for this, right? I just click the bucket name and enter the access key and then the secret key and the directory. I have import directory and the file name. I have actually uploaded a file called customer.csv. And for this, just enter what's the name of the source where this file is coming from, and well, what system is this coming from, just for like lineage perspective. But I just put in a data warehouse for now. And for the access key, I'm sorry, I need to get it from my list. Just give me a moment. Let me copy paste the key. Okay, let me reshare my screen. Okay, yes, so I've pasted my access key and secret key in here. And once this key is entered, everything is entered, I just click next. And what will happen is the system will read the file, right? The file details, which is customer.csv, which is available in the Amazon S3 folder. And for this one, I need to specify the data lake object or the DLO where I want to store this data in, right? So what happens in Customer Data Cloud, there are a couple of steps, a couple of stages of the data, right? The first time the data is retrieved or ingested from multiple systems, it will be in the data lake objects. But then from data lake objects, we will map this data to the data model. I will show that later, right? So the data model, like individual data model or transactions or order data model and so on. So once the data is mapped to the data model, there will be also a data model object, right? So from data lake object, it will be transformed to the data model object, right? So that's where we will mostly working on when it comes to doing segmentations and so on. Right, for this case, I need to specify a new data lake object where I want to store this data in, like the customer.csv I'm bringing in from Amazon S3. So I just need to give this a name, customers S3, for example. And then on the left-hand side, you see I need to specify what is the category of this data, whether this is a profile data, engagement data, or other data. Right, so profile data actually represents individuals. I mean, data that consisting of list of profiles, list of individuals, and those kind of things. So that's profile category. But engagement category is where we need to connect data in regards to like email behavior, transaction behavior, a customer related behaviors, basically like purchase, add a cart, those kind of things, right? It's considered engagement type data. Other data is like any kind of unrelated like other data such as like product catalog or even like list of stores, list of branches, and those kind of things that will be categorized as other. In this case, what I have in the data on the Amazon is profile data, customer data. So that's why I need to specify it as profile. When I specify as profile, I need to specify also the primary key. So if you see here on the right-hand side, it already reads the data available in Amazon S3, like which is customer CSV. In this case, there are 20 fields available on here, and you can see it's actually reads the file and it lists down all the available fields on the file, right? And this is where I can specify which field is the primary key. In this case, the primary key is the client ID, right? I just put in the client ID in this case. And then what I can do next is if I want to make some changes in terms of the field labeling, this is where I need to do it, right? So for example, VIP, I want to rename this to, let's say, is VIP, right? I can just rename it is VIP, surname, maybe a last name, and so on. So this is the way you make the field more readable in the data lake objects, right? Rather than using the field names from the file itself, that's normally not really easy to read, right? So this is where you can do it. So maybe let me just revert it back for this example, but you can make the changes over here. And on top of this labeling of the fields, you can also create a formula fields. If you see over here, we can create a new calculations or a formula or create a new field. An example for this is sometimes you may want to process the data, right? Like for example, you want to create a new field called age, and age has to be calculated from, let's say, today, like minus the birth date, right? So this is where you can create like a formula field if it's required, right? So this is where we can specify what's the return type. In this case, is age is number. I just put in number, and I can do any functions I want over here. So in this case, I can, use the date functions, the date diff, right? I can specify the date diff in this case. I can just apply the function interval. I can just use year, and the start date. I can use the attribute data, which is the date of birth. I can use the date of birth at the start date. And for the end date, I can use like the date or today function, right, to retrieve the current date. So in this case, this will I need to do a bit of testing to make sure the formula is a correct formula for my field. I can just specify like a random number here, like for example, random date, March, maybe like, for example, and do a test, and it will do the testing for us, right? It will show us whether there's an error or our formula is correct. In this case, you see over here, there's actually an error in the input data, right? So it means the data format may not be correct. In this case, then we need to process the data format a bit. So in terms of rather than using this field data directly, we may need to do like data formatting, right? We can use the date format if functions to do so. But I think I can skip this. This is just to show you how we can create formula fields as well. It can be used for a lot of other purposes, right? It's not only like deriving a new field like age, but it can also be used for you to, let's say, identify where this data source is coming from. Let's say this is only for brand A. This data source is only for brand B, although it's called customers, right? But this is customers only for brand A or brand B and those kind of things. You can specify the business unit field, right, using the formula field. right? The formula doesn't need to be like a formula. It can be like a literal value as well. Like let's say you can just say this is for brand A, right? Or this is for brand B, and you can name this like data source systems, or I don't know. Yeah, you can basically create a new field to just for identification or for field derivations. There are a lot of use cases for that. But in this case, let's say just I click next, and this is where I can specify the frequency and what's the mode of the refresh, right? It can be upsert, it can be full refresh, right? Upsert means that only insert new and update existing data. Full refresh means that I want to refresh all the data every time I process this new file. And in this case, let me just click full refresh for this example. And there are a couple of other options you can choose. In this case, you can, if you want to log an error, if no file is found, you can do so, right? Just if this is a headerless file or not, right? And what's the refresh frequency? And the most we can go is hourly for Amazon S3. So important things to note here is that this frequency will vary based on the type of data source. Like for Amazon S3 and Google Cloud Storage and any other cloud storage options, we are able to go until like hourly, but like other data sources may not be the same. So you may want to check on that also. Okay, and in this case, I'll just click deploy. So what will happen is when I click deploy, customer data cloud, the system will create a new data stream for us, right? The data stream for this customer S3 based on what we have named it. And again, if you want to do, if you want to create more fields like formula fields, we can still do so from this interface. We can create a new formula field just by clicking this new formula field button as well. If let's say you want to add more fields from the file that you missed before, you can click add source fields as well. Let's say if you skipped a couple of fields on the CSV previously and you want to include it for this one, or let's say the CSV file that you use is updated, right? You added more fields in the CSV files and it's not listed here, like those new fields is not listed here automatically. So what you need to do is click this add source fields. It will basically reread the file for you and let you select those additional fields you want to process as well. Okay, so once we are ready with all of this, what we need to do next is the data mapping. Okay, if you see over here on the right hand side, there is no mapping defined yet. What we can do is just click this data mapping. Okay, so for this data mapping, because this is a profile data, customer data, if we see over here, it has the customer name, customer email address, as well as the customer phone number. So what we need to do here is we select what is the corresponding data model that we want to connect this data to, right? So in Salesforce Customer Data Cloud, we have a built-in customer data model. Like this on the right-hand side is like the data model objects we have built in the platform. Account, right? Account has all of these fields: account ID, account name, account number, account type, and so on, right? Aside from account, we have like, let's say campaign. Campaign has like cost, budget, campaign ID, campaign name, currency, name, and so on, right? So this is like the default or standard data model that comes with the product. But you can create a custom data model by going to this custom data model. You can create a custom object if those data model that you want to connect for the data source is not currently available. You can always create a new one, and then you can create a relationship of this new data model with the existing data model. I will show you a bit later how to do that. But for this case, because this is an individual data, it's already available as a standard data model object. I just select individual from here. And aside from individual data, we see that there are also other data such as email, as well as mobile phone, right? So what we need to do here is we need to also select contact point email. and let's say phone, contact point phone. Once we selected all those objects, we can click done. And what will happen is it will tell us, right, all those unmapped fields from this data model objects. So we have individual. Individual has a relationship with phone and email. One individual can have multiple phone numbers, multiple email address. So that's the reason why phone number and email address is not an attribute on individual data object, data model, right? So in this case, what we need to do is just to do the mapping. Let's first connect or map the individual because it's easy, right? We select this client ID and we can connect it to this individual ID. Doing that is easy. So I just need to click this button and then I just click this button. It will show me like where I want to connect this. If I'm okay with it, I just click, right? Then it's mapped. So this client ID will then become an individual ID in our individual data model. So it's very easy. And aside from this individual ID, there are also a couple of other fields we want to map. Like for example, this first name, right? I can just find first name, or this search field can also come handy. Like let's say I can just put in name. What I want to do is, let's say the surname, I just connect to a last name. Okay. So now I have mapped 3 fields: first name, individual ID, and last name. And let's say if I want to map another field, the birth date, I just click the date of birth, DOB, and I want to connect it to birth date. And I think something is missing here. So if you notice what happened here is that I'm unable to connect the date of birth to this birth date because the data types are different. So the birth date is a date time, while this date of birth field is a date type field. So what I need to do is basically to create the same type, a data type, right, before I connect to the birth date. I'll show you how we can do that. We can use formula fields to do that, or we can go back to the source fields or to this data stream definitions, and we specify manually for this field type to be date time, right? So there are a couple of options. And for example, let's skip that for now. I will show you later how we can do that. But under contact point email, we can then map this contact point email ID is required. So we need to connect this contact point email ID. This is the email name, the email address, sorry. And the same one will be used also for email address because this is just a unique primary key ID, right? The primary key ID could be any text, and we are just using the email, the same value as the email address. Okay, so we have mapped contact point email, and now we want to map this contact point phone. So what we want to do is actually similar, right? We just connect this phone number to the contact point phone ID. Oops. Phone number to contact point phone ID, and phone number to contact to the formatted E64 phone number. Okay, so once we have mapped the phone number, or I think, do we have a country code? Yeah, just give me a sec. No. Okay, so one thing, there is one. Yeah, phone country code. Okay, I think we have mapped all the necessary fields for now. And what I can do now is just click save. I can click save and close. But before that, I think I will just, I want to see if there's any questions so far from the audience.
No questions. No questions.
Oh, okay. There is no questions. Cool. So I have clicked save, and now the data has been mapped, right, from the file in Amazon S3 that is ingested to customer data cloud as data lake objects. This data is now mapped to the data model objects here on the right hand side. So what I want to show you next is how we can, let's say, process this birth date, right? Because it's a different field. So it's quite easy. You can create a formula fields. right? Let me just close it for now. I can create a formula fields like I showed you earlier, right? I can just create new one, DOB new, right? And I want to be daytime, right? So I can just do a conversion, and I want to pass date, and or I can format date as well. So I can just use this, and the date would be the date of birth, and the pattern would be like this, the daytime pattern. Right, so it's very easy. Let's say MMDD. I don't remember what is HHMM. SSSS. I don't remember exactly what the format is, but yeah, I think you get the idea, right? So it's very easy for you. Let's say if the system says, oh, you need a different data type, you can create a formula fields as one workaround, right, for this. And aside from using formula fields, what you can also do is to change this data type by going to the source fields or the definitions earlier, right? But typically it's not as easy because you are, I think it's quite easy to just create a new formula. Okay. I think there's a question. Oh, like the phone number E164. It's actually a general phone number format. I think, thank you, Fanny. I think you have answered the question. So the best practice is basically to use this standardized phone number. And the standardized phone number is actually a combination of the country code as well as the actual phone number, right? Without plus in front of them. Like let's say 91 for India, 65 for Singapore, like 60 for Malaysia, and so on. Just put in the country code without plus, then directly the phone number. And let's say in my case, I have actually split the data into two different fields, like phone number, phone country code, as well as the phone number. But if you want to combine this or concatenate this, again, it's very easy to do so using formula fields. You can just concatenate these two different values into one, and then create a new field called like E64, E164 formatted phone. Let's say I can just create one. Cool. Right? So you can just do a concat. In this case, I apply a function and just want to concat the phone country code and the phone number, and that's it. Right? So let's say if I have phone country code, right? This apply. Oops. Yeah. Can just click save. Oh, right. Ooh, there is an error. Okay, so there's one thing I will mention here. Sometimes I think this error is because I'm using like a trial instance, because it's giving me this GAC ID error. But it's fine. This will work on the real instance. But basically, you get the idea. This is like another way for us to format the phone number before mapping it. Okay, if I refresh this, if you see now, we have already successfully processed this data, right? It says now the data has been processed, total number of records is over 100, right? And if I click over here, we have also mapped the customer data into the data model objects. Okay, so what's happening now is if we go into, how do I move this? If we go into this data model, this data explorer for now, this is where we can do a bit of testing whether the data is coming in or not, right? And on this case, we can select what is like the data object we want to explore. In this case, I want to explore the data lake objects. So remember, data lake object is when the data is ingested, right? So it's without any mapping, without any formula and so on. So you can see, right, the data, it gives me all of this, right? The client ID, this customer segment, what is the data source, what is the date of birth, what is the email address, and so on. What is the agent name, and those kind of things. Do they have children? Those kind of things, right? And what we want to see as well is if we go into this data model object, we want to see whether the data has been mapped to individual correctly. And we can just go into this individual, and now we can see we have a list of individuals with the last name and first name over here, right? So, I mean, we can edit the columns we want on this button, but now we can see, oh, actually, you know what? The data has been processed successfully, not only ingested into the data lake objects, but it also has already been mapped into the data model object. And we can see all these individuals have been populated to this individual data model, right? Because we mapped only first name as well as last name. So those are basically already populated over here. But again, connecting or mapping new fields can be done easily as well. Okay, so now I have showed you the data ingestion pace from Amazon S3, how we can connect a file or files from a bucket in S3 by going to the data stream. And I have also showed you how we can create custom fields or formula fields and how we map the data from the ingested data from Amazon S3 to the data model, right? The next one I want to show you is I've mentioned which is how we deal with custom data model. Sometimes, right, the data that we are working with is not available in customer data cloud data model. If we go into this data model menu, sorry, is this a wrong one? Or this one is the right one? Yeah, so if you go to the data model objects, we can see there are a couple of data model objects that have been mapped. We have this individual account, contact point, email, and phone. And we can already see this object is connected to which data stream or which data lake objects, right? So you can see from here. But if we go into this all data models, you can see there are actually quite a lot of them, right? Like the one that I showed earlier, but sometimes we still find what the data that we are working with is not available here. For an example, if you're working with like insurance data, policy, right? The list of policy products. Policy is not a built-in data model, right? But we want to use policy because it has the relationships with the individual. One individual can have multiple policies, right? And each policy can have, has its own attributes. So for this case, what we can do, we can create a new data model, right? We can just create a new data model from scratch. And in this case, let me say it's insurance policy. This is the data model name, and I can select what is the category of this data model, right? In this case, insurance policy can be set as other, right? Because it's just a list of policies, right? And we can have a mapping between this list of policies to the individual later on, right? And the thing to note in here as well is you cannot change this later, right? Once you have created this data model with the category, you cannot change it. So you have to make sure that you select the right one. If you want to like change it, the only way to do it is actually create a new data model. Okay, so once you are happy with this, right? Maybe let me just change another one just to show you a better example. Let's say email engagements, email opens, right? And we can select engagement for that, right? And this is where I can specify all those fields for this data model. These fields are mandatory, right, from the system. These are the system fields, data source object, and internal organization. So we cannot change that, but we can add field, let's say the ID, right? Just an ID, text, and this is the primary key. Aside from ID, email open, right, requires or like the email ID. This would be text. And aside from the email ID, I can say like open date. It could be a date time for this case. And let's say maybe status, right? So text. So these are like the 4 different fields we want for this data model. You can add more fields later as well, right? So you still can change or update this data model later. So once you are happy with this, you can just click save. Oops, I missed one. I'm sorry. Which is the email address itself, but it's fine. I think we can use the email ID. Now, what we want to do is we want to map, right, this new data model to the contact point data model, right? Because this email open data model is actually a children or a detail or has a relationship basically with this contact point email data model. So to do so, we can just click this contact point email. Okay, and we can see all the list of fields of this data model. But what I want to go for is this relationship tab. If we go into this relationships, it actually gives us a capability to create a relationship with our new data model. So I can just click new. I can click, I can edit the relationship. In this case, we want to use this contact point email ID, just an example. And I can select the cardinality, right? Whether this is one-to-one or one-to-many, right? And or many-to-one, right? And I can just select what is the related object for this one. And in this case, I want, well, actually it's the opposite, right? I want to be like one-to-many, not many-to-one. So what I need to do is basically I need to select the other object instead. Just give me a second. Let me go back to data model. And the data model is just created, which is email open, just an example, right? Email open. And I can go to this relationship. Okay, new. And for this new relationship, I don't know why I cannot. It's still loading. Yeah, I think I need to wait a bit. But it's fine. Yep. So basically, you can create a relationship from here, right? Just to specify the cardinality main one to the email contact point, right, to the related field. So that's how we can create the relationship or edit the relationship between data models. So when you work with custom data models, right, I think you may need to configure all the relationships as well to tell the system, right, how one object is related to one another. So that's very important. Okay, let me just skip that. Now, once all the data has been mapped and the data model has been configured, what will happen is we can also have a graph view of how the data model has been mapped to each other, or how the relationship looks like to each other, right? And I think this needs a few moments to sync. But what you will be able to see here is like the list of one object. It's like an ERD diagram, right? So one object and its relationship to another object. Like for example, one individual, right, would have a relationship with contact point email, contact point phone, as well as let's say the email opens connected to the contact point email. So you'll be able to see that kind of relationship diagram from this graph view, but it's not showing now because it needs a bit of time to refresh the data. It's still processing. Okay. Do you have any questions so far?
I think no questions are.
Okay, cool. So if there is no question, I think we have covered like the end-to-end scenario for Amazon S3, from data ingestion, then data mapping, managing custom fields or formula fields, right, to extend the fields itself, as well as maybe to be able to confirm into the data models, data types, and any other use cases. Then also how we can create custom data model objects, as well as how this custom data model objects can also be connected, right, to the other data model using relationships. If there's no other question, what I want to show you next is Interaction Studio. How we can connect to Interaction Studio from here. But for that, let me just give me a few minutes. Let me just connect into my other account that has already been connected to my Interaction Studio instance. Okay. Let me just log out. Sorry, I'll stop sharing for now once I get my retrieve my password. Yes, so there's a question, can we edit the relationships anytime? Yes, you can edit the relationships anytime. But I think one thing to note is once you save a relationship, it requires some time to process the data model. It's not like real time. Once you save, everything will be refreshed. Okay. Just give me a second. I'm logging into their instance. Okay, now I've logged into the other instance. Let me reshare my screen. Okay, see. Yep. Are you able to see my screen now? Should be able to, right? So this is my other instance. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so this is my other instance. And in this case, on the data, if I go back to this customer data cloud setup page, under Interaction Studio, I have already connected my Interaction Studio account to this one. I don't know why it says error. I hope it's okay. Just close this. Yeah, because I have connected to Interaction Studio, when I click new, it is showing me this Interaction Studio button, right? If I click this Interaction Studio, we are able to connect or ingest data from Interaction Studio. So it's very easy. We just need to select what is the data set from Interaction Studio we want to access for this, because maybe you have multiple different data sets. You can select which data set, and I need to specify a suffix, right? And if you see here on the left-hand side, the Interaction Studio connectors or the data bundles actually is bringing you a couple of data, which is shown here on the left, right? This data is based on the interaction types in Interaction Studio. So there is order event items. So you can see the list of like order event items. Like you see this on the right hand side, you can see like the list of fields from this objects. Again, you can change the field label if you want to. Aside from order event items, we have also a list of users, right? The profile ID is anonymous. What is the Salesforce contact ID? What is the email address, and so on. The cart event items, right? What is the items on the cart? And the cart events itself, right? Are they adding items to the cart, right? Or anything to do with the cart, right? Removing items from the cart and so on. Or order events. So these order events, like basically the order itself, right? Whether they make a purchase, let's say it's considered under this order events. Or the event items, the list of items on the order itself. Okay. The catalog events is the list of events related to, let's say, your product catalog. Could be like product view, could be like a specific item that you view, right? So this events actually represents that kind of behavior. And the last one is this base events. So base events is what we call like a custom event, because in Interaction Studio, right, you can basically create any kind of action or any kind of event. Like it could be, let's say, visiting the branch. It could be an action, it could be an event, right? This custom event is not categorized in any of this. That's why it will be put into this base events. All of those custom events in Interaction Studio will go into this base events object. And you can then see what the action name here from this field. And I can just click next by default, right? Because this is a built-in integration, it will all automatically like specify what the category of the file or the data is. Like this one is engagement data, this one is a profile data, right? And what's the refresh mode? Everything is absurd because by default, every hour, right, the system will automatically absurd or update and insert new data into Salesforce Customer Data Cloud. And I can click deploy. Right, I think there's an error. I don't know what happened, but basically what will happen once you click deploy, it will create 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 data streams with these names and mapped automatically for you. So you don't need to map manually, right, to the individual data model, engagement data model, and so on. It's already mapped for you automatically, but some fields are not mapped automatically. So for some fields, you may still want to map it manually if you need the field in the data model. So those that are mapped automatically are those that are necessary, right? So that those that are very important, but sometimes you may want to use other data, right, from the previous field from here. Let's say you want to use like device ID, source, channel, and so on, and it's not mapped automatically, and you need that, and you just map it manually. Okay, and actually that's about it, because for systems like Interaction Studio with this data bundles or built-in connectors, ingesting the data from it is very easy, right? You just need to basically click next, and everything will be done for you. Okay, I don't know what errors is. Maybe it's because, again, my trial instance. So that's how we can connect Interaction Studio data to Customer Data Cloud. Let me see if there's any question. How come Amazon is trained, right? Yes, correct, Srikala. So you need to do the setup here, the Customer Data Cloud setup. Amazon S3 doesn't need any setup, right, to be shown on the creation screen. But if you want to have Interaction Studio, basically you have to set it up first here from the setup. You need to connect it to the Interaction Studio account that you have access to. If you want to have like data stream from other data sources like Google Cloud Storage, websites, mobile apps, and so on. So you can also, you need to also set it up first from here. Okay. Is there any other question?
No, Alice, no questions.
Okay, if there's not a question, I want to share a bit here. If I go back to the previous screen, you noticed when I connect the data from Interaction Studio, the data itself is not real time, right? The data is refreshed every hour, right? But sometimes the customer you are working with may ask, right, how do we do real time in Customer Data Cloud? So for real-time use case, the approach that we do is not this Interaction Studio data stream approach is basically like exporting the events data from Interaction Studio and importing it to Salesforce Data Cloud. That's why it's batch. But if you want real time, what you need to do is basically using the SDK itself here, right? So Customer Data Cloud and Interaction Studio SDK has been merged. Basically, the SDK supports both So what you need to do here, you just need to create a new connectors, which is website, and then you specify and use the Interaction Studio website SDK, right? There is a configurations that you need to do, right? If you want to send the data to just Interaction Studio or also to customer data cloud. So once you set it up, basically the data will come into customer data cloud as website data that you set up from here. I don't have any example to show you that, unfortunately, for now. Okay, let me see if there is a question. Oh, so the question I think is ingesting like multiple different SFDC orgs, right? Yeah. So if you want to connect to multiple different orgs, you just need to go to the Salesforce CRM. I think it's similar, the process. You just click connect and it will bring up like the login page. You just connect like the Salesforce orgs, right, up to 5. And once the Salesforce CRM has been connected, it will appear in the data stream. So if I go into the data stream over here, if I click new, there will be like a Salesforce CRM button, right? And it's the same as Interaction Studio where you can select the data set. From that screen, you can also select which CRM org you want to ingest from and what are the objects you want to ingest and so on. Okay. Let me see the other questions here. Connect. Practice in Trailhead. Okay. Unfortunately, I think there is no Trailhead instance for Customer Data Cloud yet. It will be available soon. So you may want to request like a special trial orgs for CDC and then do your learning from there. Oh. If they didn't click this button, then this page. What is this?
Okay, if you click page not transfer, then this menu should be shown.
Yeah, this one on the most part.
Okay. Oh, I think someone is saying that it's already available in Trailhead, which is cool. Yep. So yeah, you can find this Customer Data Cloud lesson and trails in Trailhead, and some of those may have like an ability with the org itself for you to test on. Okay. I have never actually, I haven't opened Trailhead for a while. Last time I checked, it wasn't there. It's good to know that it's already available. Thank you. I guess if there is not a question, I'll just stop here for today's bootcamp.
Thanks, Aris. Thank you so much for taking your time and really giving a lot of information on these connectors. Thank you so much. So I have one question, Aris, like when you be connecting with our Data Cloud to Interaction Studio. So let's take an example. If our Interaction Studio contains multiple data sets, can we get all the data sets information under Data Cloud? Aris? Aris, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, my question is like, if we connecting one IS platform with multiple data sets, can we see all the data sets inside our Data Cloud while designing a data model?
Yes. So You may need to, let me just reshare my screen, just give me a moment. How do I,
Oh, okay, the first one.
oops,
Actually, all of this.
yeah, so here, right, for you need to connect each data set into customer data cloud, and you need to specify it manually here.
Yeah, got it.
Yeah, and then from there you will have like multiple different data streams, and then you just need to map it a bit manually, right? You specify a formula fields to determine like which data set it's coming from, right? And then map this data set field, the formula field, into the data model object.
Yep, got it. Thanks, Aris. Thank you, Aris, for a wonderful session. Thank you so much for your time as well. And yeah, I think audience, any other questions? If not, I think we can wrap the session. Thank you.